Hello everyone, and I'm here to do one of my favorite videos I do every year, and that is my favorite books of the year. Now, the one thing that I did change for this year is I don't have any Victorian books on the list because it feels like apples and oranges to have my more contemporary books and then to have the Victorian reading. So I actually have a video coming out talking about all the 4 and 5 star Victorian books that I read this year. I wanted it to feel very positive, so I didn't kind of dwell on the books that I didn't enjoy as much. So there will not be any Victorian books on this list, but there is a video coming with that. Because I realized I had 30 books I wanted to talk to you about. I could have eliminated some of these, but I genuinely enjoyed them and wanted to tell you about them. And so yes, let's get started. And the very first one is the first book that I finished in the year. So it was so lovely to have a 5-star read starting out the year with. And that is Just Ella by Annette K. Larsen. This is a historical romance. I thought from the cover it was going to be a Cinderella retelling. I thought it was a fairy tale. It's not a fairy tale, it's a historical romance. But I loved the, the court setting and the castle, all of that feel to it just felt really lovely. And I loved Annette Larsen's writing. And it's just such a shame because I went ahead, I haven't read anything else by her now. And I went ahead and bought the next in the series because it is the first in a series. And I thought, I don't want to let a year go by where I don't read the next one. And then here I am doing this yearly reading favorites and I didn't read the next one. So I loved her writing, and I think it deserves, I think many of you who like sweet romances would really enjoy Just Ella. So I definitely recommend Just Ella. The next one, and this is a real quiet, kind of unusual pick, and that is Winter Cottage by Ryrie Brink. So for any of you who have read, Caddy Woodlawn, I think there is much more by Ryrie Brink out there for you to enjoy, and Winter Cottage was one of those. And do I have my copy? I do have my copy here. What I really like, I think it was just last year that they brought this back into publication because for years it was out of print. And it has these beautiful illustrations throughout. So I just wish every single book came with illustrations in it. And it's a real quiet story about this father and his children who end up staying in this cottage that they do not own. It does not belong to them, and they stay for the winter months. And it just, the back says, immerse yourself in the story of love and companionship amidst deprivation. And I think that's such a beautiful way of putting it. I think that the element of this that really stood out to me was how much the family loves each other and how they might not have much, but they have each other, and it just makes it for a really winsome story that I hope I reread this winter. Hopefully it does happen. So really enjoyed this. And then the next one was a mystery by Elizabeth George, In the Presence of the Enemy. Any Inspector Lynley is probably going to end up on this list. So I only read one Inspector Lynley, this year, and it's on this list. The stories definitely go darker than I usually read, but it's Elizabeth George's writing. It's so incisive and really packs a punch and has you guessing the whole time over who done it. But also it's more why done it is the point of her stories. Just thoroughly enjoy Elizabeth George's writing. The next one is A Game of Hearts by Joanna Barker. This I read around Valentine's Day, so it made for very fun and sweet Valentine's Day reading. It starts out with an enemies to lovers kind of romance, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. I love Joanna Barker's writing. I haven't read a book by her that I haven't enjoyed, and this one was no different. So I loved there was an archery element, and Marigold, our main character, she really wants to join the archery society, but the women in town are not allowed to join. So that is one of the plot points. And it was just really enjoyable. I love Joanna Barker's writing, and it's lovely to find romances that I can enjoy. Then the next one was Emily Davis by Miss Reed. This is by far my favorite out of the Fair Acre series. You are looking back on the life of a much older character and seeing kind of what her life was like in the part of the story that you haven't known her. And it was really wonderful to get a much richer understanding of the character of Emily Davis, to see what her life was like before. It was just, it felt like such a consoling book to see a life that has some sorrow in it, but then finding the joy in the midst of that. I felt it was just a beautiful, beautiful story. Then the next one is the penultimate Vanderbeekers book, Vanderbeekers on the Road. So I did read the final one, Vanderbeekers Happily Ever After, but the subject matter was a bit heavier than I was anticipating. It involves childhood cancer, and so I think just because of that, it won't be a favorite. It was really hard to get through at points. But Vanderbeekers on the Road involves them going on a road trip, as the title would suggest, and I just really loved getting to be with them on their road trip and seeing the adventures that they go on the trip, and kind of how they grow even more close-knit as a family. So I really love this children's series and can't recommend it enough. And then the next one, another children's book, and that this is starting the middle grade March contingency. I had such a fun time during middle grade March, and I really have high expectations again for this year's middle grade March, so hopefully it doesn't let me down. I just find it to be such a really comforting readathon right at the end of winter. March, technically the end of March is spring, but it's really, really cold, and so just the middle grade literature feels lovely and comforting. And the first one was The Pink Motel, another Carol Ryrie Brink about this family that buys this Pepto-Bismol pink motel in Florida, and the different characters that come to stay at the motel, and there ends up being a bit of a mystery, and it just had some real charm to it. I loved it. I really like her writing. So I have 2 books by Carol Ryrie Brink, 2 more that I own now, that I am really excited to read this year. So hopefully I will read them both and just continue to read more and more by her. Okay, then the next one was The Star That Always Stays by Anna Rose Johnson. This is about her Ojibwe grandmother, or maybe it's great-grandmother, Norvia, and her life story, and how at the time that her great-grandmother was alive, is it grandmother? Oh, this is so bad. Anyway, it was not really, you couldn't be a respected member in this town and be Ojibwe also. So kind of hiding that heritage and trying to find her place in this new town that she's living in when she's had some life changes. And it is the closest I found to Betsy Tacy. That's not actually a Betsy Tacy book. Really loved this beautiful, beautiful story. And then the next one that I loved was The Island of Horses by Eilis Dillon. This is an Irish book all about 2 boys and their big adventure they go on. It's right here. To the Island of Horses. And it's this island that is off the coast of Ireland, and there are wild horses that live there. And the boys really want to go to this island, and there ends up being such a pacey kind of adventure that they go on together. And I loved the camaraderie that the 2 of them have together, and then the older generation that these boys know as their family members and just different townspeople. It made it just such an impactful story. And if you want a good fashion adventure story, I definitely recommend The Island of Horses. Then the next one was Walking with Miss Millie by Tamara Bundy. This is an intergenerational friendship story, and so I love those so much. I think there's so much that can be gained knowing someone closely and intimately that isn't, a peer, and that's very true for this story. It is just a beautiful, beautiful story. It's set in the southern U.S., and it's Miss Millie is a Black character who knows her neighbor who's moved in, and her young neighbor just learns so much from her time with Miss Millie and going on the walks with her, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful story. And then the next one is another good adventure story, and that is Crispin, the Cross of Lead by Avi. This was my first book by Avi, and it certainly won't be my last. This is another one that I can't believe I haven't read any more in the series. There's 2 more Crispin books, and Avi has written so many books. He's very prolific, so I'm very excited to Have many Avi books ahead of me, and I think definitely every middle grade March I'll be reading something, if not more than one something by Avi. And it's set, it's a medieval setting, and Crispin, he does not know who he is. He has, what do I want to say? He's kind of an outcast in the town. And then slowly he starts to discover more about his identity, all while kind of fleeing. He's been framed for different things, and it was just breakneck speed, and I loved every second of it. So really enjoyed it. Then another adventure story that was not breakneck speed. This was more gentle, and it's Adam of the Road by Elizabeth Janet Gray. This won the Newbury, and I'm so glad that I picked it up. I just really enjoyed getting to follow Adam. Like I said, a medieval setting, or I don't know if I said that, but it has a medieval setting, and something happens. Adam loses something. And so then for the rest of the book, he's trying to get this thing back, trying desperately. And I just loved the quaint feel of the story as Adam travels from place to place, and I just found it thoroughly enjoyable. Then one that really will tug on your heartstrings, it is bittersweet, and that's some of my favorite middle grade literature, and that is Love, Ruby, Lavender by Deborah Wiles. She also wrote one of my favorites, Each Little Bird That Sings. And in Love, Ruby, Lavender, Ruby is left for a summer without her beloved grandmother. Her grandmother goes on a trip to Hawaii, and Ruby just misses her like crazy, and so they write letters back and forth. And I really enjoyed the multimedia feel of the story. Ruby also has some big grief that she has to deal with, and so you're getting to see her process that grief in this story and hopefully come out okay on the other side of the grief. And it's beautiful and moving and just a really special book. The next one is another sweet romance, and that is Miss Newbury's List by Megan Walker. You're following our main character, whose name eludes me now. I have a lot of books that are kind of swirling around in my brain. And she has this list that she wants to, it's a bucket list of things she wants to do before she gets married. And then lo and behold, all of a sudden she has an engagement and 2 weeks in which to do the list. And she kind of enlists her best friend to help her complete this list. And there is an unlikely romance that blossoms, and it's just really, really beautiful and sweet. And then the next one is The English Heir by D.E. Stevenson. This just reignited a fire in me, my love of modern classics. I think what's happened over the past few years is here and there I've tried picking up a modern classic, and I happen not to enjoy that one, and then I've kind of just given up for a while on modern classics, but I'm hoping to fix that in the upcoming year. And it is a really interesting take. The setting is just as World War II is really starting to become a reality, and this British family has a German friend come visit. They've never met him, but he's the son of a German friend, rather. And so just how complicated that can make relationships, that time, not a great time to really have a close friendship with a German. It would just make things so complicated. I just really appreciated how it had these hard topics in there, but it didn't feel nihilistic. It really took things on, and it took them on bravely, and it was just a really special book. So highly enjoyable D.E. Stevenson. The next one, when this summer, I was really kind of all enthused about American history. And so two that I read then, first is Washington, A Life by Ron Chernow. It is a big old biography of George Washington, and I loved it so much. It was really interesting getting to learn more about George Washington, getting to see kind of the ins and outs of the French and Indian War and then the American Revolution. Just absolutely fascinating. I really appreciated that it didn't vilify him, but it didn't glorify him either. I just thought it took a real even-keeled approach to George Washington. And then I read a children's biography of Abigail Adams, Witness to a Revolution by Natalie S. Bober. And I really enjoyed this. I just have such admiration for Abigail Adams. I find her to be an incredible role model. She spent so much of her married life separated from her husband and having to hold down the fort all on her own. And I just find it really moving to think about the strength that she showed in the midst of really huge trials and tribulations. And yeah, she's a woman that I would love to try to emulate in my daily life, if at all possible. Then switching gears completely, and such a fun summer adventure story, and that is Hertz Gets Fused. And this is put out by Owl's Nest Publishers, and I really love this. It's written in verse. Hertz accidentally sets fire to his room. And so then his mom ships him off to stay with a relative for the summer. It's an older relative he doesn't know at all, and he ends up meeting, it felt kind of like a Kate DiCamillo book. He meets this quirky cast of characters in his time that he's staying with his relative, and it was just really charming and endearing. It had me tearing up at the end, and yeah, just a great, solid adventure story, but written in verse. Just a really special, unique book. Then the next one was an Agatha Christie that I absolutely adored, By the Pricking of My Thumbs. It is a Tommy and Tuppence, my first Tommy and Tuppence that I've ever actually read. And I really found it so intriguing. The crime starts where they are visiting, Tommy and Tuppence are visiting Tommy's elderly relative in a nursing home. It's not really a nursing home. It's, I don't know the term that would be used, but it's a private facility. And Tuppence is sitting in the lobby, and a lady who is a resident looks at her and says, "Oh, is it your child who was found behind the fireplace?" What? Like, what a beginning. And so then Tuppence starts to investigate this, and crazy things start to happen. But I loved the atmosphere in this story. It was so intriguing. And yeah, I really enjoyed this. And there is a Miss Marple episode that they turned it into a Miss Marple a few years back, and it's done really, really well. And so I like the incorporation of Miss Marple in the TV episode, but the book is perfect on its own. And then the next one that I read and loved was The Greedy Queen by Annie Gray. The catalyst for reading this was I had the privilege and honor of interviewing Annie Gray, the food historian, as a Victober video. And The Greedy Queen is a food memoir, I would say, of Queen Victoria. And it was fascinating to see Queen Victoria's life and look at it through a culinary lens. And Annie Gray's writing is so engaging. It doesn't feel at all dry or stuffy. And it was just such a really fascinating memoir just to see how impactful food is on all of our lives. And then the next one that really stole my heart, and I just loved it so much, and that was Summer of the Monkeys by Wilson Rawls. What a beautiful, beautiful story of family. It's all about Jay Barry, who one summer his life completely changes when a circus train crashes near his hometown, and the train car of monkeys escapes. And they are giving a huge financial reward if you catch the monkeys. And so he spends the summer trying to catch these monkeys. I read it aloud to the boys. It is such a moving, beautiful story, and such a hidden gem. And several people have asked, is it as sad as Where the Red Fern Grows? It is not. No, not at all. It does have some parts that are somewhat sad, but it doesn't feel at all tragic. Just so moving and life-affirming. It's just an absolute favorite book now. I loved Summer of the Monkeys. The next book that I loved this year was another Owl's Nest publisher book, and that is Not Exactly Love by Devin Brown. This is a story of unrequited, or they say semi-unrequited love. And it feels so authentically middle school, how you feel when you have that first crush. You cannot think about anything else, and you just make some stupid decisions, and it's incredibly endearing. And there's lots of drama about the upcoming Valentine's Day skate and who's going with who. And I just found it altogether endearing. And it's going to be an annual Valentine's Day reread. So I just loved every second of it. It was so charming. And then the next one is Exile by Lauren G. Warnamendi. And this is the first in the Daughters of Arden trilogy. And it is a retelling of the Maid Maleen fairy tale. You know me, I love a good fairy tale retelling. And for a book that is, all set in, not all, but the vast majority of the book is set in this tower, I cannot believe how gripped I was. And it's all down to Lauren Warnamendi's writing style. And I found the character of Maleen So interesting, and I just wanted to know more about her and to know her better. Really enjoyed it, and I loved the fairy tale setting. It was just lovely. And then the next one, thank you so much to Mitzi from Mitzi Reads and Writes. She sent me this book, and it is The Wheel Spins by Ethel Lena White. And this, they've made several movie adaptations of it as The Lady Vanishes, where this woman is on a train. She has a couple conversations with this other female passenger, and then she falls asleep, and when she wakes up, she can't find her friend that she had been talking to, and she starts asking people about her, and they say, "What are you talking about? There was no woman that matches that description that was on the train." It was so interesting, and I could not put it down. As soon as I started, I could not stop reading it. I had to know what was going to happen. I had to know, where did this woman go? And it was just such a wild ride, and I loved every second of it. And the next one, and this came at just the right time. I was wanting spooky middle grade, but not too spooky, right? So this is middle grade horror, I think it falls into, but it was just the right amount scary for me. And it was called The Stitchers by Lorian Lawrence. And it felt so cozy and simultaneously spooky. It was just perfect to me, the combination. And our main character, whose name eludes me, of course, this happens to me. She and her best friend, they feel like the older people on their street, there is something unnatural about them. Like they are unnaturally youthful for the age that they are. And things just don't seem normal. There's something uncanny happening on their little street. And so she and her friend, they investigate and they want to figure out kind of what is happening on their street. Is there something sinister kind of under the surface? And I loved every second of this. It was such a fun, wild ride. And I loved there was a lovely rhythm of it, right? Where creepy things would happen. They would find out more details and be shocked. And then there would be times of coziness where they're like having a movie night and eating pizza while they watch the movie. So just perfect amount scary. I really loved it. Then A Murder is Announced by Agatha Christie. This was my very first Miss Marple that I read, where a murder is announced in the newspaper in this very small town. And they say, a murder will happen at this time, at this address. And our characters then have to watch this murder unfold and figure out who done it. And I love the character of Miss Marple so much. I think even more than Poirot. So yeah, this was really an enjoyable one. Then the next one, and one that I'm so excited to read more from the series, and that is Magic by Angie Sage. This is the very first in the Septimus Heap series, which is historical fantasy. The magic in this series is so charming and whimsical. For any of you that have seen the Disney cartoon, The Sword and the Stone, and the kind of whimsical, charming magic in that, it felt very much like this. I loved this world. I loved all of the domesticity that is there within the adventure. It's just the perfect combination to me if you're going to have, adventure and mortal peril, then with times of kind of coziness by the fire. Something about it, it's just such a perfect combination. So I cannot wait to read more in the series. And another middle grade to add to this list, I just had a great middle grade reading year, is The Labors of Hercules by Gary D. Schmidt. One that I love so much. I read it not once, but twice. And it is one of those bittersweet books where Hercules, his parents have died, and so he's grieving them throughout the entirety of this book. This book follows him over the school year following his parents' death. And I just love the very memorable cast of characters that Gary D. Schmidt puts in here. I love getting to see the ups and downs that Hercules is going on. And there is so much love for Greek mythology in this book, and getting to see the difference that a wonderful teacher can make in the life of a student, and if they invest in them and just really put work into molding this student into being the best version of themselves possible. So a really wonderful, wonderful middle grade. And then the next to last book, and one of the final books I read this year, and that is A London Child of the 1870s by Molly Hughes. This is the first in the trilogy that she wrote, and I absolutely loved her writing style. This is a memoir, her looking back on a decade of her life, showing the different kind of scrapes that her siblings got into. There's some naughtiness, and so of course it's very amusing then to read about. And the quirky personalities of her parents, just the different idiosyncrasies that they had, and there's definitely also some book love that's in there, which I always appreciate. I wrote down several Victorian book titles, and cannot wait to continue on with this trilogy. So really enjoyed it. I can't believe I waited all year to read it. Yeah, just absolutely loved it. And then the final book of the series, the final book of the final favorite book, the 30th book, and one that I completed 2 days ago, and that is Taken by the Hand by O. Douglas. This was my first O. Douglas book, and it is certainly not my last. I forgot that I actually had bought, when I got my Kindle a year ago, A Proper Place by O. Douglas, but then Arpita at Bagful of Books talked about how perfect Taken by the Hand is to read at Christmas time. And I think if you like Rosamund Pilcher, if you like Betty Neals, please, please try O. Douglas. I got on with her writing style so well. I just ate it up. There is so much book love and discussion of book love in Taken by the Hand. And Beatrice is your main character, and you are getting to follow her life after it's a really hard time in her life. Her mother has just died, and she doesn't really have anyone else besides her mother. And she has to decide kind of what kind of life does she want for herself. She's not limited financially, but she just doesn't really have a place she would call home for herself. And then wonderful things start to happen for her. So you have to hang in there for a bit, but I knew that wonderful things were going to happen. And there are so many deliciously Christmassy bits right in the kind of the middle of the story. And I loved that. And it just has the sweetest ending. So I think that sometimes books like this can feel kind of saccharine, but I have to say it was like just the right amount sweet for me. It didn't feel at all overly sweet. I loved it so much. So I'm very excited to read more by O. Douglas. And then my friend Elizabeth told me there's a number of O. Douglas books on Project Gutenberg, which is so exciting. So free O. Douglas books. Yeah, cannot wait to read more by her. So those are my favorite books of 2023. I hope that you enjoyed getting to hear about them and maybe would pick some of them up. And yeah, just it was a wonderful, wonderful reading year. Thank you so much for following along. It's always delightful to get to share the books that I'm excited about and tell others about them. So I hope that you enjoyed getting to hear about them. And I really hope to have another year with some new favorites to add to just the books that I love. Thank you as always for watching, and I will be back with another video soon. Bye.